Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We are talking about on-campus housing, the application cycle, and things that new students will need to know as we move forward with the. I'm going to wait just a minute here to let some folks enter into the webinar, and we'll kick off about a minute or two after the hour. Hey everyone, we are just taking a few minutes to let others join us for this webinar, and we'll get started here soon. Alrighty, we will get going here today. Thank you all for joining us today for our on-campus housing info session, specifically for new students. We should have some time here at the end of today's webinar to address some questions that you might have. But before we kick off today, I do want to let everyone know that we are going to be recording this session, and it will become available for future reference and viewing on the orientation website if you're not able to join us for the entire session today. I also want to mention that Campus Living is hosting a number of Q&A sessions throughout the summer, every Friday at different times, in which we invite you to come join us, ask some questions that might arise throughout the summer as you're working on your housing application process. And with that being said, I will start by introducing myself. My name is Francesca Span. I use she, her pronouns. I work in 2 different offices here on campus. I help direct new student orientation with the first year experience office on campus. And I also have another role working in the Campus Living office doing daily operations work. So I kind of see both sides of student life with orientation and campus living together. I will pass it over to Ben Mayos.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Mayos. I'm the Assistant Dean for Campus Life and Director of Campus Living, and use he, him pronouns. Arrived at LLC just a couple of years ago.
And then finally, while today's session is going to be mainly hosted by Ben and I do just want to take a moment to introduce Peter Smith. Peter, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm Peter. I am the student director of new student orientation and the new student peer mentors.
I'm so sorry, my computer just crashed my Zoom. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay. Alrighty, we will get going on walking through our Campus Living presentation for you. So today we're going to start off by going over the housing application timeline and process, so you're aware of what you need to be working on over the summer for your housing application needs. We'll talk about what housing options look like for our incoming students and what eligibility within the residence halls looks like. We'll address some parts of on-campus housing policy that you should be aware of. We'll give you an overview of what the housing portal, our external student-facing Campus Living website looks like. And then finally, at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So I will be kicking us off with the housing application timeline. And so currently right now, all new students are able to work on the housing application on the housing portal if you have created your Lewis and Clark LC account and email account. You do need to complete the creation of your account before you're able to log into the housing portal and submit your housing application. And just keep in mind that it can take up to 24 hours after creating your account to be able to log into the housing portal. If at any time you're having issues accessing the LC housing portal, feel free to send the living@lclark.edu email account an email to let them know that you're having some trouble. NSO is also able to help you troubleshoot with some of that if you're having access issues. In addition to the housing portal being open and available for you to apply, we also have our Living Learning Community applications open as well. That application can be found on the Lewis and Clark Campus Living website. It is not part of the housing portal. It's a Google form, and you'll be able to learn more about our living learning communities within our residence halls and apply for them if you're interested in doing so. Finally, and importantly for certain students out there, is the start of the housing accommodation process. So if you think that you need a housing accommodation or an academic accommodation for that matter, we really urge you to start working with OSA, the Office of Student Accessibility, sooner than later to make sure that you're able to connect with a provider and get proper documentation and follow up with the Office of Student Accessibility about any housing needs you might have and paperwork you'll need to provide. Please keep in mind that June 9th will be the deadline for submitting that LLC application. It doesn't take very long, so try and get it in sooner than later, but June 9th will be the deadline for that. And June 15th is when you will need to have wrapped up the process with OSA in order to guarantee placement into housing accommodations that you might have for this coming fall semester. Now, you are able to work with the Office of Student Accessibility after that date. It just won't guarantee you housing accommodations for the fall semester if you don't get it in by June 15th. That same day, you should be receiving acceptance letters and more information about being accepted into a living learning community and either accepting that placement or denying it if that is no longer something you're interested in, or if you want to live elsewhere on campus. Next are 3 dates to also keep in mind is June 18th. That is a Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. is going to be the deadline for new students to complete that housing application. We'll talk a little bit more about what the housing application entails, but it should take you no more than about half an hour to complete. So we really do urge you to complete that housing application by the deadline. You'll have until June 22nd to accept that housing or the LLC placement that you receive on the 15th. And then sometime in mid-July is when you should be hearing from the Office of Campus Living with your LLC assignment, your room assignment, as well as your roommate assignment. We know that's a really exciting time. We can't tell you the exact day that email will be coming out, but sometime in mid-July. Later, I will be giving you a demo of the housing portal, but I just wanted to show you what the front of the housing portal looks like. When you're ready to log in, you'll press the student login button, and that's where you'll start to log in with your LC credentials using your LC23- email account. Just for some more information about what you're actually going to be doing as a new student on the housing portal when you go through your application, new students are, and again, we'll talk about this too, there is a residency requirement for you to be living on campus for 4 semesters. And so you'll be able to select all your housing, learn about campus living, application updates for this year that you'll need to keep in mind. We ask some information about your pronouns, gender identity, some personal details that you'll share with us that relates to your housing needs. More information about the housing accommodation process will be included in the portal. Same with living learning communities and stuff within the residence halls. We share date and policy changes, things like move-in, when you need to have your meal plan selected, etc. We do offer winter break housing. Winter break housing is not included in your semester housing. So if you are in need of housing between the fall and the spring semester, you will need to let us know about that. There's a separate application that will launch in the fall, but we like having a good radar on who is perhaps interested in that winter break housing. There's an opportunity to learn more about GradGuard renters insurance. You will, of course, read and review and sign the housing contract, learn more about overflow housing options, room preferences within the halls, and last but not least, not on this little timeline, is roommate group building. We do have some resources about roommate group building available that I'll touch on later. But yes, new students are able to find other roommates and form roommate groups on the housing portal. And with that being said, I will just kind of quickly give you a rundown of what our living learning communities look like on the campus. Living learning communities are optional for students to apply for and live in. It is not mandatory that you live in an LLC, but we do find many students do like living in a living learning community to be on a similar hall and area with students who share similar interests. We have a number of living learning communities that are available for incoming students. We do have a few that are reserved for upper level students, as they're in places like the on-campus apartments, which first year students aren't able to live in. But we do find that global languages and cultures, the visual and performing arts, environmental action, holistic wellness, outdoor pursuits, social change, and aspiring educators, all of these are incoming and first year student eligible living learning communities are popular. And you can learn more about each one of these living learning communities, a description of what they partake in and provide for students over the semester on the Campus Living website. I'm not going to read all of this, but I did just want to let everyone know that we do have an option for renter's insurance if you're interested. It is not required to have renter's insurance while you're an on-campus resident. But there's tons of reasons why having some renter's insurance to protect your items is a smart idea. And we do want to make sure that students are aware of that option. I do want to also mention that for incoming students, they do not need to pay a housing deposit. Housing deposits will be required for your second year on campus, but as an incoming student who's just paid their admissions deposit, you do not need to pay a housing deposit for this coming fall 2023-2024 academic year. Kind of moving forward in the housing application process and just talking about roommates and kind of that process, because I know new students have a lot of questions and excitement when it comes to finding roommates. When you get onto the housing portal, you will be able to list information about how you choose to live within the residence halls and how you think you'll be waking up in the morning, keeping your window open at night, music when you study, you know, all the different things that do impact living with another person in the residence halls. Just some quick tips as you start down that journey of trying to find a roommate. We really do implore you to take some time to think about how you want to live and what living in that situation might actually look like for you. It can be really exciting to think, I'm starting a new time in my life. I'm going to become a morning person. And then you'll get to college and realize maybe that isn't the lifestyle that is going to work with you on a day-to-day basis. So trying to be open and honest with yourself will help result in a better roommate pairing, and considering habits and different things like that. Definitely take some time to mull that over for yourself. The next part of that roommate profile will be, of course, choosing a roommate if you would like to. Building a roommate group is not mandatory for new students, but we do find that roughly half of new students choose their roommate groups and form them on the housing portal. New students are able to form roommate groups with 1, 2, or 3 other people. So in the end, you'll either be in a roommate group of 2, 3, or 4. We do want to point out to incoming students that although you might build a roommate group with 1 other person, it does not mean that you are not eligible to live in triples, overflow triple, or quad spaces, which means that if you form a group with 1 other person, Campus Living might pair you up with another roommate group of 2 to live in a quad together. So just keep that in mind as you're looking for roommates or moving forward with the roommate group building. Now, when you are on the housing portal, you will be able to search for other roommates using a few different options. If you've already connected with someone on, say, the incoming class Instagram page, you know that you're excited about living together. You can always communicate with each other to find each other's screen name on the portal and form a group that way. Or you might not know who you're wanting to live with, but interested in taking a look. You are able to search for other things on the housing portal, like filtering by profile information. So let's say you know you are a morning person, you're a student athlete, you're going to be waking up early. You can choose to filter by the time in which you're waking up and seeing who maybe is mentioning other information in their bios and going from there in terms of communicating with other incoming students and forming that roommate group. If you choose to not form a roommate group, like I said, that's totally okay. Campus Living will place you into a room with other incoming students. We do try and keep incoming students with other incoming students, and so we will handle that pairing on our end. Finally, just want to really reiterate that the housing application is due on June 18th, 2023 at 11:59 p.m. If you are not able to get the housing application in on time, this does mean that you will be placed after the rest of the incoming students have been placed into their on-campus housing. And the later you're placed into housing just reduces the likelihood that you'll be placed into a room that meets your preference, and it might be an overflow room space on campus. Okay. I'm now going to pass it over to Ben to talk about housing options and eligibility.
Would you mind stopping and restarting the slide just to capture some format changes that I made? Thank you.
Yes. One moment.
And on that note of what Fran was saying about the deadline to complete the application phase, we get a lot of information from students when you complete the housing application. Students tell us a lot about how they have lived in their current rooms at home and how they believe they're going to live when they get here. And so while we can make assignments for students who haven't completed the application, we have to do it sort of absent a lot of that information that we do try to use to try and make some matches that our housing system helps us make some automatic matches as well. So really want to encourage folks completing the application because it just gives us so much more detail to work with. All right, go ahead, Fran. So first off, just talking about where new students are eligible to live. So new students are eligible to live in Copeland Hall, our Forest Halls, which is a cluster of 5 smaller halls, all named for beautiful different types of trees. One of those 5 buildings is for juniors and seniors, but the other 4 Forest Halls are for new students. Platt Howard Hall, and then Aiken Hall. So those are our new student eligible areas. There is some variation on that for transfer students, depending on what they're transferring in with in terms of credit load. Sometimes they're transferring in and they are 21 years or older, which means they are technically exempt from the residency requirement. They're eligible to live in additional areas on campus. And so if you're a transfer student or you are a supporter of a transfer student, that's something that we encourage transfer students to reach out to us so we can make sure that they understand where they're eligible to live. As Fran said, new students are not eligible to preference single rooms. They have to go through the accessibility process, the accommodation process with the Office of Student Accessibility in order to receive a single room accommodation. Campus Living really acts at the direction of the Office of Student Accessibility when it comes to student accommodations. And so generally, new students are placed into doubles, triples, quads, and overflow spaces, as Fran said. Go to the next one. So no one likes graphs, but this is also a way for us to sort of help you understand a little bit more about what does the portfolio of Campus Living look like in terms of room type. Lewis and Clark has many designed quads And I think that's something that sometimes surprises people. These quads tend to have an outer study room and then an inner sleeping room. And so the outer study room has desks and things like that. And then all the bunks are in the sleeping room. And so that's why we really encourage people, if you find more than just one other person that you are vibing with and would like to live with, it's great when we can place people into a triple or a quad who have all sort of found some harmony together and really would like to have a shared living experience this next year. We don't often see people looking beyond that one person that they initially connect with, but we keep encouraging it. The other thing I would say with this is you can see, if you're looking at the pie chart, that the vast majority of our housing is not Holmes, Hartsfeld, and the apartments, which are for sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And so we continue to have a lot of people who pass their first year at Lewis and Clark will live in Stewart, Odell, Aiken, Copeland, Forest, and Platt Howard. So we don't have any communities that are all first year communities. And that is different than some other campuses that have first year buildings or freshman buildings. All of our housing is pretty much combined housing of multiple class years. And that's really great in terms of people's matriculation to the college and forming friendships that transcend their class year. But that is a difference that we do like to highlight. I wanted to plug living learning communities again, just because they are a really great way to incorporate something that you may be passionate about, or a student may be passionate about that they're not pursuing academically, or maybe a way to enhance something that they are pursuing academically. And we really have been growing these programs over the past couple of years, putting more student resources, more leadership resources into them. And we're really excited about how those are shaping up. It is an additional Google form outside of the housing application to complete, like Fran said. But one thing we are doing now is what we call out-of-house membership. And so wherever a student lives on campus, if they're excited about one of these topics, they can still join that living learning community from wherever they're assigned on campus. So if someone's really interested in outdoor pursuits, but they get placed in a different building, or they preference a different building, we still want them to be able to engage with the programming that's happening in outdoor pursuits. So that's something to look out for when you come to LC in the fall, as we sort of enroll people in out-of-house memberships. So overflow housing options. So what those look like are design spaces where we have plussed up the occupancy in that space. The additional students who are assigned into those spaces receive full complement of furniture. The only variation on that is our Aiken Hall, where there's walk-in closets instead of armoires. Most of our other facilities have either built-in or freestanding armoires, but in Aiken, there's two very large walk-in closets. And so for the small number of triples that we have in Aiken, the students share those walk-in closets. There is a financial discount or incentive for students who are assigned in overflow or temporary spaces. It's 20% off the standard roommate. We do have sort of an entry period, because we do prepare for all the students who have deposited at the college, but we do know that some students are still making decisions. And so while we have many students on the books to arrive, we do have some movement that happens when we first open at the beginning of the year. And so for a few weeks, we sort of have a settle-in period where we find some opportunities to remove some of our overflow spaces as well. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight, and this is based on working with students and families over past years, is that students who do end up living in overflow housing during the year will receive an earlier time slot than students in their class year for the following year. So as a freshman living in overflow space and becoming a rising sophomore, applying for housing for their second year, they'll have priority room selection over other rising sophomores who are not in those sorts of spaces. So there's both the financial incentive, but we also want those students to feel like long-term, there's going to be more options for them when it comes to their housing experience. And then just sort of calling out where we have overflow housing options. Our Aiken Hall, which is central just across from the student center, has a number of overflow triples and a larger 5-person space. Howard Hall, which is attached to Platt, has some overflow triples as well. And then Copeland Hall has sort of a mixture of triples and quads throughout. Forest has a very small number of larger overflow spaces that the students come up with all sorts of beloved names for the Ponderosa condo, or Condo is one of those. And so they're very spacious, large spaces. The students tend to rearrange the furniture in really unique ways to create sort of rooms within rooms. But that's what our overflow housing looks like. And then lastly, housing accommodation. So we do get students who go through a process looking for either and or housing and or dining accommodations. So these are modifications to their housing assignments, such as the room type that they need, or needing no more than one additional roommate in the space, or a dining plan modification that's based on some sort of documented health-related need. Students go through, for whether it's dining or it's housing, they go through the Office of Student Accessibility. We go through this interactive process where that office works with the students, works with providers to best understand what accommodations are going to meet that student's needs. And then the same with our assistance animals and parking exemptions. But as Fran already said, there is a important date to start that process by. That's the 15th of June, called out here. And really, between that date and when we need to cement new student assignments, the Office of Student Accessibility is working very hard to review all the requests, to work with all the students and families, and to tell Campus Living what we need to be incorporating into our housing assignments. All right, so some policies that we just want to touch on. The first is the residency requirement. Brand already touched on this a bit, but it is a 4-semester undergraduate student requirement, and students who are living locally within 30 miles of the college are exempted from that should they choose to be. And that's something that we typically honor, at any point during their time at Lewis and Clark. And so if someone who could qualify for that exemption chooses to live on campus for their first year and makes a decision to go back home for their second year, that exemption can still be applied. If the student's married, or if they're over the age of 21, or once they sort of cross the 61 credit threshold, if they're an incoming transfer student, all of those would allow them to no longer be held to the residency requirement. And then we have made an update this year to the residency requirement. We have worked with our Office of Overseas and Off-Campus Programs that organizes our study abroad experiences, which are incredibly popular among Lewis and Clark students getting out and seeing the world. And we wanted to acknowledge that these are still college facilitated programs and living experiences. And so now if a student goes abroad, which they really can start doing in their second year at Lewis and Clark, that semester abroad will count towards their completion of the residency requirement. And then the last piece that we wanted to talk about from a policy perspective is our gender inclusive housing. Nearly all of our housing portfolio is gender inclusive, all gender housing. We allow students of all gender identities to live with other students of all gender identities. There are a couple floors within our footprint that remain single gender living floors, and so those are called out sort of below on this slide. We have a single gender floor for men in Copeland, and 2 single gender floors for women in Copeland, and 1 single gender floor for women in Spruce. So this is something that students can indicate on their housing application. We'll work to place them on one of those floors if that is their preference. But all of our restroom facilities, aside from those floors, are all gender or gender inclusive restroom facilities. All right, Fran, back to you.
Thanks. I'm just going to take one moment to stop the screen share and switch over to my other screen. Alrighty, I wanted to take some time to make sure everyone is familiar with the Campus Living website and learning how to properly navigate to different incoming student information that you might that you will definitely need to know, and other parts of the website that will be helpful in making some decisions about your on-campus housing. There's a few different ways you can navigate to the Campus Living webpage. Campus Living has already sent new students a welcome email. We link out to this page and that. Another easy way to find our website is just to Google search Campus Living, Lewis and Clark College, or search Campus Living in the Lewis and Clark website search bar. Once you make it to this website, you'll be able to learn more about the applying for incoming student housing under the Applying for Housing tab. From here, you'll be able to navigate to the incoming student webpage, in which a lot of the information we're going over today is available, including links to the housing portal, our new student housing application timeline, information about the residency requirement, some of that transfer specific student information if you're a transfer student out there. You can start learning about what we suggest you pack and bring to the campus, as well as what shipping looks like. We link to a residential handbook. This is updated every year and includes a slew of information and resources that will be very important for you to read through when you make it to campus, or even before you make it to campus. And then below, you'll see that we have some information about renting a mini fridge or getting renter's insurance coverage with GradGuard. On the topic of mini fridges, because this comes up a lot for incoming students, we do see a number of students choose to rent a mini fridge. Usually they'll split the cost with a roommate. The mini fridges come with a microwave unit on top of it, and so it's really convenient. It gets delivered to your room before you come to campus. Scrolling back up on this page, when you see over here on this right-hand tab, there are some helpful links for you to navigate to. The first being a link to the housing portal. Like I mentioned in the slideshow, the housing portal will be where you make your housing application, find your roommate group. It's where later in the year, when you make it to campus, you'll be asked to log in, complete a room condition report, and a few other things will come up on the housing portal, changing a meal plan, for example. You will log into the housing application using your LC23 email account. And again, if you ever have questions, feel free to reach out to Campus Living. Also on this right-hand tab are two different documents we have to assist our incoming students with navigating through the housing portal process and forming those roommate groups. These are available for everyone to read through and gives you a step-by-step on what getting through the housing application process will look like, some notes to keep in mind as you go through the housing process, and things like that. The same is available for forming those roommate groups and things to keep in mind about what it looks like to form groups of 2, 3, and 4, how you find the other students in the housing portal, how you verify your roommate group, and what the implications of forming a roommate group look like as a student who's maybe applied to live in a living learning community. We also give you some tips on how to write a roommate bio, information that's helpful for our office to understand about you in case you don't find a roommate and you would like us to place you, and stuff like that. On this same website is where over the summer we'll start to update more information about move-in and what move-in will look like for our incoming students. Move-in day for our incoming students will be on Wednesday, August 30th. That will also be the first day of new student orientation, with the asterisks of those who are coming to campus as an earlier arrival as part of perhaps a sports team or a different on-campus program. If you are a fall athlete or part of something like speech and debate, for example, your move-in day will be different, and please follow up with your coach or the person who's running your program for more information about your move-in date and the logistics regarding that. The one other thing I want to mention is that for any of those students out there who are going to be participating on a new student trip, when you come to campus sometime in mid to late August to depart on your new student trip, you will leave all of your packed belongings in a secure warehouse with College Outdoors, and then you'll be able to access your residence hall room on Tuesday, August 29th, when you return from that trip. That will be the night that you have your first night in the residence halls. We do host you in the residence halls on that evening. We don't expect you to continue your outdoor trip on the college campus. And so that gets coordinated directly with orientation and the college outdoors office for when you make it in. And then finally, if you are wanting to learn more about the campus living office, connect with us, or anything like that, you're always welcome to learn more about the office staff on our About Us page. We have a Q&A up there. And then finally, I know earlier I mentioned that we are hosting some additional Q&A sessions for campus living over the summer. And if you'd like to join us, if you just scroll down to the bottom of our campus living webpage, you'll be able to see our different housing Q&A sessions with the Zoom link. If you click into it, you'll see the time in which we're hosting those. And so we welcome you to join those if you have more specific questions or just have some quick follow-up questions that you want to talk through with someone in the office. And so with that being said, I'm going to stop my share screen and we're going to take some time with our remaining 15-20 minutes to see if there's any questions that you might all have for us that we can answer. I do also want to mention that Peter is here. Peter is a current campus resident, will be living in the residence halls next year and has lived in the residence halls this past year. So he's also an excellent resource if you want a student perspective on residential living. So we'll take a minute or two for you to type out some questions if you have them for us. Okay, I see that Carrie has asked us a question about roommate requests and applying for a living learning community. So if you've applied for a living learning community, you are able to form a roommate group, but there are some exceptions to that. So if you are interested in living in our visual and performing arts living learning community, unfortunately, you are not able to pull in a roommate to live with you in that living learning community just because of how popular and high in demand the VAPA LLC is. Now, of course, if you form a roommate group with a student who has been accepted into the VAPA LLC, that's great, and we can make that placement, but there is that little exception for the VAPA LLC in particular. I do see Carrie also asked another question about new student trips and what students do on those new student trips. There are a multitude of different new student trips, and so I would direct you to the College Outdoors office to learn more about each particular new student trip and what they have to offer. It's my understanding that there are still 2 new student trips that have yet to be fully booked up. One of them is the Creative Arts PDX, Creative Arts NST, and then Ben helped me out. The other one is the Spiritual Life NST. So if you're still interested in those, you can learn more about them on the CO website.
Yeah, we can touch on these ones. So first, can we tell you more about the meal plans? Yeah, we can certainly tell you more about the meal plan. So the new incoming students are eligible for several of our meal plans. We have a 14 meal plan, a 14 flex meal plan, and a 19 meal plan. Those are the plans that are available. What flex means is that they have sort of a declining balance of points or flex dollars that they can spend at our dining venues on campus. The number, whether it's 14 or 19 meals, is the number of meals that they can have within a week, a dining week, if you will. There are 19 meal periods in a week, and so the 19 meal plan means that they can enter Fields Dining, which is an all-you-care-to-eat dining facility every single meal period that week. The 14 meal plan means that they're going to pick and choose from those 19 meal periods what they want to use. Those meals don't roll over to following weeks, but the flex points that they get on a flex plan do roll over to the spring semester from the fall, anything that's unused. So those are the meal plans that new students are available to take. The 14 flex is by far the most popular meal plan that we see first year students and sophomores choosing, by a long shot. And then for students who are going to participate in the new student trip that takes place on campus, the two that Brian mentioned, we will do our best to make sure that we can get those students into their assigned fall room. So they will, in all likelihood, be residing in that room. That may mean that they're somewhat spread out on campus, but they will sort of have a home base for their new student trip and really start to form community. And many of them do get drawn towards similar programs on campus. So we'll see some overlap for the arts PBX trip with our visual and performing arts living learning community, for instance. But yeah, we will try to get them into their permanent.
I will just answer this one question about not being able to see a meal plan if you're on the housing application. There might be a setting issue with your account that we need to update in the campus living office, or it just might mean that you haven't progressed yet to the spot in which you're able to select a meal plan. So if you're having any troubles with meal plan selection on the housing portal, feel free to send living@lclark.edu an email, and someone in the office will be able to either update your settings or add the meal plan to your account. But we will make sure that we audit students' applications and ensure that everyone has a meal plan for next year. And so people are aware, students are able to change their meal plan up until 5 p.m. on the first Friday of the academic semester. So for this coming year, that will be Friday, September 8th. All right, I see another question about making changes to your housing assignment and what that kind of process looks like. I also see some other questions about food classes and things. I'll address that on after I kind of touch on housing. So we are able to accommodate housing changes for new students, but we do wait a couple weeks into the semester before we do start enacting with room changes. We want to give students a chance and an opportunity to work through some of maybe the discomfort they're feeling living with a person for the first time in the residence halls, getting to understand what it's like living with other people, reworking on roommate agreements, which is something that new students will do once they start their time here at Lewis and Clark. So we do pause once the semester starts just a little while to wait and see, because sometimes students just needed some time to settle in and things work themselves out. That being said, if we hit that date where we do move forward with room changes, you are more than welcome to communicate your desire to change your room with your RA and your AD. Your RA is a current student, a resident advisor who lives within the residence halls on your floor, who will be in community with you during the whole school year. They're a great resource, especially if you're starting to feel kind of the early stages of maybe considering a room change. And then I mentioned earlier AD. I get really like, we're using these terms all the time, so sometimes I forget to explain, but an AD is an area director. This is a professional live-on staff member who lives on campus and oversees the different areas on campus. There's one for Platt Howard, one for Copeland, one for Stuart Odell Aiken, one for the Forest Halls, and one for Holmes Hartsfeld in the apartments. So once you've started those conversations with your RA, they'll elevate you to the area director to have those next conversations about making a room change. And then if a room change is approved, the central office steps in to help with making that assignment change, offering different room spaces, and moving forward with that room change.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll have students approach us because they want to do a mutual switch they, think that they would both enjoy living with the other person's roommate. And so those mutual changes are fairly easy for us to facilitate. And I'll just plug that we would much rather they come and tell us they want to do that than to just trade keys and move their items, because that becomes a whole web we have to untangle. But those moves tend to be easier to facilitate because the other ones we're waiting to see what space we have to shift people around. And then between fall and spring, we will always have some movement that we can facilitate too, as folks want to move buildings or change rooms within a building.
Just to address some of the other parts of that question, like I mentioned earlier, there is the ability to change your meal plan up until the first Friday of the semester. Fortunately, you cannot change it after the first Friday of the semester for that current semester, but you are able to update your meal plan for the following spring semester, for example. As far as information about changing your classes and stuff like that, there's something called an add drop period related to courses. I'm going to save some of that information for the folks in the academic side of campus in the College Advising Center, who will be hosting some webinars later in the summer to talk about classes and registration. But students do have some time, both during new student orientation, to change their class registration, as well as the add drop period into the start of the semester, if they want to make a class change.
I'll take this question about the LLCs and VAPA specifically. We want our LLCs to have a mixture of people who bring experience and those who are new to whatever the focus of that living learning community is. And so when people are submitting an LLC application, they're going to give us a real sense of what they would bring to that community or what they'd be hoping to gain by living in that community. So it certainly has nothing to do with whether you're looking at a career or a vocation in the visual and performing arts. And it could be that it's something you really haven't had much exposure to, but you'd be really excited to live among people who maybe do bring some previous experience with them to that topic. So definitely please apply for VAPA and review our other living learning communities and consider those as well.
Also, on the terms of like flexibility and how that equates to Lewis and Clark, I found it to be really flexible. I actually did end up, although it wasn't talked about, I had a challenging living situation my freshman year, and the campus living was very flexible. And I find that in general, classes are super flexible too. And if you like, in the first few weeks, if you want to look at other classes, like go look at them, you can add classes, you can drop classes, and like food, there's multiple options. There's a lot you can do on campus, which is really lovely as a student.
So as far as a meal plan question that just came up, the question was, what happens if I select a meal plan and I don't use all of it? So for the incoming student meal plan options, like Ben mentioned, there's the 14, 14 flex, and 19. Now the references in those numbers equate to how many meals you receive a week. So it is on you to know how many meals you are eating, counting those meals, and understanding how many meals you want to eat throughout the week. And so it really is a use it or lose it within the week. If you only eat 10 meals out of your 14 for the week, you would just miss out on eating those other 4 meals. They don't roll over into the next week. Although there is that 14 flex meal plan, and when we say 14 flex, the flex in that refers to something called flex points. Those flex points do persist throughout the whole semester. New students or anyone on that flex plan for that matter receives 250 points to use at their discretion throughout the semester. We see some people blow through those flex points right away with reckless abandon, and other people pace themselves to allot their flex points throughout the semester. If you do get to the end of the fall semester and have not used up all your flex plans, they will roll over into spring, but any remaining flex points at the end of the spring semester will go away if you don't use them. That being said, and I think I know what Ben was going to mention, is that Bon Appetit is happy to work with students on different ways that they can use up their flex plans. If you're finding that you're not really using all of them, they're super happy to work with you on ordering a case of a certain drink, a box of chips, something like that, to make sure that you really are getting the most out of your flex points.
Yeah, at the end of the year, we have a small convenience store in our student center, and it becomes a bit of like a doomsday prepper post-apocalypse scenario where everyone's making a run on the convenience store with their remaining flex points and walking out with boxes of things. And Bon Appetit loves to help with that.
Are there any other questions that you might have for us? We're approaching the end of our time here on the webinar today, so make sure you drop them in that Q&A chat if you have anything you want us to address. What residence hall has the biggest double rooms? Ben or Peter, what thoughts on this one?
I think Aiken, as far as new student eligible buildings go, has some of the largest double rooms because the walk-in closets are quite large. And so when you sort of think of those, they feel like pretty spacious rooms. Copeland also has, you know, some pretty large doubles as well. However, there's a lot of built-in furniture present in Copeland, and the same in Forest too. So you're not able to sort of like play with the space as much in those buildings. Platt Howard really doesn't have built-ins, and so you get that same flexibility of furniture set up in Platt Howard, and so those are decently sized doubles as well. But when we're talking about like big versus small, the variations are pretty minor. We're not talking about like sweeping large spaces in one building and, you know, smaller over in another building. So I actually think that your ability to customize your furniture setup makes a bigger difference in how you use the space. And yeah. What do kitchens look like? I love this question. So Copeland and Forest have so many kitchens. I mean, it's really kind of amazing. Forest alone, I think, has 17 kitchens, and Copeland, it's like 20 or maybe a little bit higher than that. Aiken Hall has just 2 kitchens, and Platt Howard, I think, probably has more on the order of 6 or 7 kitchens. And so if you are someone who really thinks they're going to be using a kitchen quite a bit, I would say Forest and Copeland offer a lot of opportunity for that. And most of the kitchens have full-size fridges, have ovens and top surfaces with hoods, and so they're pretty much full-on kitchens.
However, if you do use the big fridges in the communal kitchens, do know that it is a college dorm, and sometimes having a mini fridge is quite nice. I highly recommend the mini fridge because you will go to class and your things will be gone. So use them with caution.
Problems with bugs. We have a season, a bug season. I would say it's a Pacific Northwest thing. It's not unique to Lewis and Clark, but we do get these shield bugs. However, the college has recently taken part in sort of like a biological release of the natural predator of these shield bugs called the samurai wasp, which is a really, if you Google it, it's a cute tiny thing that's harmless to pretty much everything except shield bugs. It's like the only thing they care about is going after shield bugs, and so it's pretty dramatically effective. So this next year we're expecting to see a lot fewer of those, but otherwise, you know, we see normal pest problems that tend to relate to how people are keeping up the space, you know. So sometimes we'll see ants, but those ants are usually related to, as Peter mentioned, sort of common kitchen cleanliness and more of the lived experience, less of an infestation.
And just on the topic of the shield beetles that you will see, they are harmless, the worst they will do is if you crush them, they will stink. That is why they are called stink bugs. So when the weather does change and we do start to see more of them on campus, we'll send out some helpful tricks and tips on how to navigate cohabitation with the stink bugs and what you can do to try and trap them without making them stink. Because it's not very nice. Alrighty. Well, if there are no more questions coming in, I think it is time for us to wrap up this webinar. I do want to thank you all for attending and asking questions and hearing more about what on-campus housing looks like, what that housing application process looks like. And again, if any questions come up, you're more than welcome to email living@lclark.edu, nso@lclark.edu, join any of the campus living Q&A sessions, and reach out to us about anything that might come up with the housing portal, meal plans, etc. Otherwise, you'll definitely be hearing from Campus Living later this summer with more information about where you'll be living and what it's like to finally make it to campus. Thank you all again for being here, and have a good afternoon.